Welcome to the Crime Report with Ron Chhinzer. My name is Ron Chhinzer. I've spent over 20 years in law enforcement in Canada, and what we're going to be talking about are some major stories that happen throughout the country. Now, we need your support to be able to keep telling these stories. Visit junonews.com to subscribe. And if you visit junonews.com/Ron, you can save 20% off your subscription. Now, all of this helps us tell the stories that matter the most and the stories that you probably won't read about in any other news source. This is a story about failure, not just one man's horrifying crimes, but a system that let him do it again. His name is Christopher Ward Dunlop, and he murdered two women 14 years apart. Both were vulnerable, both were sex trade workers, and both were targeted because he thought no one would care if they died. In 2009, Dunlop strangled 38-year-old Laura Ferlin in Calgary's Deerfoot Athletic Park. He dumped her body in Fish Creek Park like she was garbage. When he was caught, he admitted to undercover officers that he was looking for someone who wouldn't be missed. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter in 2011, and he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. He served every day of that sentence, no parole, no early release, and in June 2022, he walked out of prison a free man. Just 8 months later, in February of 2023, he struck again. This time, 58-year-old Judy Mears was his target. Dunlop used his wife's SUV to avoid being recognized, showing clear signs of planning. He picked Mears up, took her to the same athletic park where he killed his first victim, and attacked her with staggering violence, stabbing her 79 times, slashing her throat, and burning her body. He brought gasoline and a knife. He left his phone at home. He planned to erase her existence, but she fought back. Investigators found Dunlop's blood in snow nearby and a defensive wound they believe from Mears' final struggle to survive. The investigation from the Calgary Police Service was thorough. CCTV footage, cell phone tower data, GPS tracking, and the discovery of Mears' belongings in his wife's SUVs all led to him. The forensic evidence was clear. There was the intent. In July of 2025, Christopher Dunlop was convicted of first-degree murder and indignity to human body. Judge Glenn Feasby called the kill planned, deliberate, and sexually violent. Now, Dunlop now faces a mandatory life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. But a conviction isn't closure. It's a reminder. Dunlop should never have had the chance to reoffend. After serving his full sentence, there was no long-term monitoring, no public alert, no parole conditions, and he was released with no real safety net for the community. And despite his first victim being targeted, vulnerable women, reports say, he was rated a low to moderate risk. Now, that's a massive system failure. He deliberately chose victims he believed society wouldn't care about. He even researched online how to burn a body. That tells something horrifying, not just about Dunlop, but about how some predators view marginalized women in this country as disposable. That's just not a policing issue, it's a cultural one. People are rightfully asking, why wasn't he tracked? Why weren't high-risk flags raised? Who decided he was safe? It's time for a change. We need parole and sentencing reform for violent offenders, mandatory long-term supervision, upgraded risk assessments, and better coordination between correctional services, police, and parole officers. These are basic tools we're missing. We need to protect the women being targeted. That means real trauma-informed support, safe housing, exit strategies, and investment in programs that see these women not as statistics, but as people worthy of protection. And most importantly, we need to kill the stigma. Every victim deserves justice, regardless of what they do for a living. Dunlop's conviction is justice for Judy Mears, but real justice means she should still be alive. Justice for Judy should mean change, not just another headline. Now let's move to another story. In December of 2023, a woman called Bell Canada to have her home internet set up. She expected a technician to come in, do the job, and leave. What she got instead was something no one should ever have to experience, especially not in their own home. The technician who showed up was 22-year-old Summerpreet Singh. After asking to use the bathroom, he returned with his pants unzipped and his genitals fully exposed, and they stayed exposed for almost 20 minutes. This wasn't an accident or a moment of confusion. He stood there exposed while making inappropriate, sexually charged remarks about the woman's body, her dating life, and even asked if she could help him get a job. This was completely invasive, predatory, and deliberate. Imagine this happening to you or somebody you love in your own home, in a private basement apartment where you expect safety and peace. The psychological damage wasn't short-term. The victim described this as being emotionally tethered to the incident, and she became withdrawn, developed severe anxiety, avoided public spaces, and even moved out of her home in fear he might return. Her sense of safety, it's gone. Her ability to focus and work shattered, and the ripple effects, they're still ongoing. Now, Singh was ultimately charged under the Criminal Code of Canada for committing an indecent act with the intent to insult or offend. He was found guilty at the trial, and the Crown asked for jail time, while his defense asked for leniency, arguing he was young, had no criminal record, and importantly, that a conviction would negatively affect his immigration status. This is where the Canadian immigration system comes into play. When someone is allowed to live and work in Canada, there's a social contract in place. Respect the laws, respect the people, and uphold the values that make this country safe. When that contract is broken, especially in a way that violates another person so deeply, it's fair and necessary to ask whether that individual should remain in this country. Justice Godet agreed. She ruled that granting Singh a discharge to protect his immigration status would be against the public interest. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was calculated, prolonged violation of trust in the most private of spaces. And the judge made it clear, protecting the public and reinforcing accountability outweighs the personal consequences for Singh. This is a welcome decision. The final sentence, 90 days of house arrest followed by a year of probation. He's got some conditions, which means no contact with the victim, staying 100 meters away from her at all times, to go to mandatory counseling, a weapons ban, and a DNA order. There's no sentence that can undo what this woman experienced, but what matters is that the justice system recognized it for what it was, a serious, deliberate act that violated her home, her peace, and her dignity. That matters, and that needs to be remembered. Now, this one went viral and made headlines. A 58-year-old man with 5 prior impaired driving convictions and 3 lifetime bans walked out of court on bail again. His name is Kaushal Kasiram. And on July 5th, 2025, he got behind the wheel of a vehicle he had no legal right to drive while drunk, and he caused a brutal 4-vehicle crash in Brampton. 3 people were injured. One of them was a 21-year-old man who's now clinging to life, suffering from catastrophic life-altering injuries. Emergency crews responded just after 4 p.m. to the intersection of Highway 50 and Coleraine Drive in Brampton. Now, this scene was chaotic, twisted metal, wrecked cars, innocent people hurt, because one man ignored every restriction, every warning, and every court order. Kasiram, who lives in Mississauga, was arrested at the scene. He's been charged with impaired driving causing bodily harm, driving with excess blood alcohol, and 3 counts of prohibited driving. He wasn't just banned from driving once, he was banned for life 3 separate times, and none of it mattered. Despite his record, despite the fact that he had repeatedly shown contempt for the law and public safety, the court released him on bail again. His only condition, he's not allowed to drive. The same condition he's violated again and again. There's no ankle monitor, no interlock device, no meaningful enforcement, just paperwork and a promise from a man who's already broken them all. Peel Police didn't hold back. Deputy Chief Mark Andrews called for real consequences, saying repeat offenders must face consequences sufficient to stop them from continuing to offend. And he's right, because right now the system isn't stopping them. It's enabling them. This is bigger than one man. This is about a legal system that has allowed repeat impaired drivers to keep gambling with innocent lives. We've got so-called lifetime bans that aren't enforced, bail conditions that are ignored, and sentencing that treats impaired driving as if it's just a lapse in judgment, not a criminal pattern with deadly consequences. What does this say about our priorities when someone can be banned from driving for life multiple times and still get behind the wheel, get drunk, nearly kill someone, and walk free? The young man injured in this crash may never recover. 2 others are still in hospital. These are real people, real consequences, and the damage is permanent. But the system that allowed this to happen, it hasn't changed. If we want that to stop, we need action. Mandatory jail for repeat DUI offenders, vehicle forfeiture, GPS monitoring, real enforcement of driving bans, no bail without real risk assessments, and updated sentencing laws that reflect the seriousness of impaired driving and the ongoing danger repeat offenders pose. Because here's the bottom line. A man banned 3 times for driving for life just got bail after ruining another person's future. What's the point of laws if we don't enforce them? What does bail even mean when somebody keeps breaking the rules? And who's protecting the public from the next Kasiram? Until this country starts treating impaired driving like the violent crime it is, we'll keep hearing stories like this, and the next victim could be somebody you love. Now, this next story is completely heartbreaking, and I'm going to give you a trigger warning. It has to do with a child being sexually assaulted. In the quiet rural town of Quaidville, Ontario, which is about 170 kilometers west of Ottawa, an 8-year-old girl disappeared from her home one evening in late June. The first thought was that she'd been attacked by a wild animal. In a community surrounded by thick woods and farmland, the theory felt plausible. But what police uncovered in the hours and days that followed was far more horrifying and deeply human. Just after midnight, around 12:30 a.m. on June 24th, the little girl was found badly wounded on Quaidville Road. She'd suffered multiple traumatic injuries, life-threatening ones, and was rushed to hospital in Ottawa. Somehow she survived, and to this day she remains in serious but stable condition. At first, medical professionals believed her wounds were consistent with an animal mauling. Pathologists backed it up. Residents were told to keep their kids indoors, and traps were set. But even as that theory gained traction, the Ontario Provincial Police kept their investigation open-ended. They didn't lock in too early, and thank God they didn't. DNA testing revealed no involvement of animals. No bear, no wolf, no stray dog. What the evidence did show was that this was an attack by a human being. And on July 8th, police arrested a 17-year-old male and charged him with attempted murder and sexual assault with a weapon on a person under the age of 16. This was an 8-year-old girl. The charges confirmed what many feared, but couldn't say out loud. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't wildlife. It was somebody in the community, a young offender whose identity is shielded under Canada's youth criminal justice laws. And for Quaidville, a tight-knit rural place where everyone knows each other, the emotional shock has been overwhelming. It's not just fear, it's grief, it's disbelief. How could this happen here? How could anyone do this to a child? And there's no miracle in all of it. Police have openly said the girl's survival is nothing short of remarkable, and the extent of her injuries and the isolation of where she was found should have led to a very different outcome. But she's alive, and that matters. The investigation was carefully deliberate. OPP avoided tunnel vision, and they consulted multiple forensic experts, gathered critical evidence, and never stopped digging. That work is being praised now, but it also highlights how fragile early assumptions can be. Had they locked into the animal theory and not kept pushing, a child predator could still be free. There are also questions that still haven't been answered. What weapon was used? Why did it take so long to rule out an animal? And what's being done to make sure this can't happen again, here or anywhere else? This case is shining a light on the gaps in the system. In small rural communities like Quaidville, there's limited surveillance, long response times, and not enough boots on the ground. That leaves children in those communities more vulnerable, whether we want to admit it or not. There's also the delicate balance between privacy and safety. The youth offender protections in Canada are in place for a reason, but when an entire town is shaken to its core, people want answers. They want to know what kind of danger they were in and might still be in. Right now, there's very little clarity about the weapon used, the exact nature of the threat, or how the attack unfolded. And that leaves an information gap, one that creates anxiety, distrust, and even fear. So, where do we go from here? We need better forensic first protocols to make sure science, not assumption, leads investigations. We need rural safety strategies, surveillance patrols, better emergency access. We need police forces equipped to handle these rare but devastating crimes in remote areas. And we need a communication policy that doesn't just protect the rights of the accused, but also provides enough clarity to keep communities informed and secure. Finally, we need to support victims and the towns that they live in. That means mental health care, trauma-informed support, and long-term community healing. You don't just move on from something like this, you survive it, and then you rebuild. In Quaidville, that process is just beginning. An 8-year-old girl survived something unthinkable. And while that's a miracle, it doesn't erase what happened. This case reminds us all that evil doesn't just live in big cities. It can find its way into the smallest, safest places. The question is, what will we do with the truth? If we want to prevent this kind of horror from repeating, it starts with acknowledging the failures, closing the gaps, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. We owe that, not just to the survivor, but to every child in every quiet town across this country. Late last night, former U.S. President Donald Trump released a direct and pointed letter to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, threatening a 35% tariff on all Canadian imports unless Canada takes immediate and aggressive action to confront the fentanyl crisis happening in our own country. Trump's message was blunt. Either Canada steps up and works with the U.S. to dismantle the sources of fentanyl within its borders, or it will pay a steep economic price. He left the door open, however, saying if Canada cooperates, he's willing to reset the relationship and work together as a likable trade partner. Canada's response so far has been to downplay the issue, claiming that we're not a source or a country that hosts fentanyl, and insisting that the real problem lies elsewhere. But that narrative doesn't hold up against the evidence. According to the RCMP, Canada is currently home to over 4,000 organized crime groups. Many of these networks are tied directly to the drug trade, and several are suspected of operating clandestine fentanyl labs within Canada's border. Intelligence sources, former law enforcement officials, and investigative journalists have long warned that domestic production, processing, and distribution of synthetic opioids are quietly fueling a crisis that extends far beyond our borders. The Canadian government's position: there's no significant role being played by us domestically, and it's increasingly at odds with the reality that we're all facing. Law enforcement agencies have executed large-scale drug busts involving massive quantities of fentanyl and methamphetamine at Canadian ports like Vancouver's Delta Port. These seizures point to well-established smuggling and distribution routes, many of which are operated by transnational gangs like the Hells Angels, East Asian crime syndicates, and the cartels with direct links to Mexico and China. Past intelligence operations like Project Sidewinder exposed some of these alliances decades ago, yet little has been done since to dismantle or disrupt these networks at scale. Trump's letter taps into that frustration. He's not just highlighting the cross-border drug issue, he's framing Canada's crime problem as a national security threat. And he's not wrong. With fentanyl deaths surging across North America, there's no room left for bureaucratic denial or political spin. If Canada continues to ignore the reality of organized crime within our borders, it risks further alienating our closest ally and trading partner. This situation demands more than statement, it means enforcement. That means targeting fentanyl labs operating in Canadian jurisdictions, dismantling the organized crime groups behind them, and working with our U.S. counterparts on intelligence sharing and joint force operations. Trade security and public trust are now on the line. Trump's warning is clear. Canada can either acknowledge the scale of its organized crime network and act, or we're going to face the consequences. The choice is now in Canada's hands. Thank you for watching The Crime Report with Ron Chhinzer. We can't do this without your support. Visit junonews.com/Ron to save 20% on your Juno News subscription. This is the only place you're going to get hard-hitting and real stories that Canadians are talking about and that matter to you.